Coming up on 7:16 on a cloudy Tuesday morning at mic number 2, Mr. Dan Hall, mic number 3, Ron Smith, and the subject today is guns and concealed carry and anything else Ron wants to throw out there with Dan, right?
Yeah. There you go.
Greetings, gentlemen. Welcome.
Good morning. How you
been?
Good
morning. And by the way, Dan and I also sometimes disagree on objects. So,
what, slingshots? That's the only thing you didn't bring today was a slingshot.
Well, we thought about it. How do you want to start this, Dan? Do you want to start off a little bit, or shall I?
Well, Ron called me and asked me if I'd be interested in talking about guns. Of course, Ron and his wife both took my class on concealed handgun licensing. And did you get your license yet?
Absolutely.
Okay. And during that class, we talked about different kinds of guns and what have you, and he thought that might be something of interest for the public, talk about particular types of guns and those that are suitable for concealed carry and those that may not be. So I brought a few with me to talk about. But if you want to ask me some questions or let me know what's on your mind, I'll see if I can.
Well, the first thing I've got now here is, should everyone be able to own a gun? And my answer to that is no. And the reason I say that is because gun ownership should be restricted to citizens of the United States. And I don't think they should be permitted to felons, persons who have committed violent acts or been convicted of domestic abuse. Because those are the people that we don't need to have a gun in their hand or their possession. Anyway, what do you think?
Well, you've covered most of the things that have been at one time or another involved in the law. Initially, the Federal Firearms Act had said violent felons couldn't be in possession of guns. Later, they creeped up and said all felons. And so I have some concerns about somebody who one time wrote a bad check not being able to have a firearm. That sort of bothers me. I'm with you on violent felons. The subject of citizenship, we copied Florida's law when we adopted our concealed handgun licensing in 1995, and initially it said legal resident of the state of Arkansas. After 9/11/2001, where the perpetrators were people that were here non-citizens on visas that overstayed their visas, our legislature went back and changed that to, first thing, you must be a citizen of the United States, and then a resident of Arkansas for 90 days. And we had that in effect for 10 years probably. Well, since 2000, 6 years. And then last May, Federal Judge Wolf ruled that that was unconstitutional to disallow a non-citizen. If a person is here as a permanent legal resident, for example, with credentials from INS, they had as much right to self-defense as a citizen does. So they kicked out that U.S. citizenship part, and as a matter of fact, this month, a bill came out of our legislature, went to Governor Hutchinson's desk to be signed to remove that requirement from the law, the citizenship part.
Okay, rephrase all that kind of in a nutshell for us, Dan. So what was INS?
Oh, Immigration and Naturalization
Service.
We have people that are here legally, for instance, a lot of Philippine citizens that come here for education and then become a permanent resident, and they have a permanent resident card. They have essentially, I think the only right they don't have now is the right to vote.
But if they go through the naturalization process, they would get that, right?
Well, if they go through the naturalization process, then they can become a citizen, but some of them never do. They just have a permanent legal resident status.
Interesting.
Well, another thing is a lot of people don't know the difference in the different types of guns. To them, a gun is just something that fires a bullet. Well, there's long guns, such as shotguns and rifles, whether it be 22, 30-06, 12 gauge, anyway, or even a muzzle loader. And then there are handguns. That's what draws the most controversy from all these lawmakers. Well, first of all, there's two basic types of handguns, revolvers and pistols. And there's several different kinds of each of those. And now I'm going to let Dan tell us a little bit about the different kinds of pistols.
Well, that's a great point. And as a matter of fact, our law in Arkansas, when you're applying for a license to carry a concealed handgun, if you're going to carry only a revolver, your license would be restricted, no semi-automatics. If you wish to carry an automatic, then you have to qualify or demonstrate proficiency with semi-automatic, and then you can carry either or. And the reason for that is quite simple. A revolver, you open the cylinder, you put in 5 or 6 bullets, whatever it is, and you close the cylinder, and when you need it, you pick it up and shoot it. It's monkey-proof. There's no magazine, there's no decocking lever, there's no safety. All of those things on a pistol, a semi-automatic pistol, you first load a magazine and you put that into the frame of the pistol, and then you have to operate the slide to put around in the chamber. And then if you're not ready to shoot it, you have to be able to decock it and put it on safety. There's a lot of moving parts there and things to know to be proficient with a semi-automatic. And so that's why they did the restriction.
Well, even on revolvers, there are several different kinds. Anyway, and each has an advantage. A single-action revolver, you must cock the hammer each time. It's like the old West guns, and then pull the trigger. And when you cock the hammer, it rotates the cylinder. And a little off the wall here. Do you know why the Colt revolvers rotate to the right from the back of the gun?
Mm-mm.
Because that's where the loading chamber was to put another cartridge in or eject your old one, was on the right-hand side of the revolver.
Really?
And then you also have double-action revolvers, which means that you don't have to cock that hammer first. You simply pull the trigger, it cocks the hammer, and fires the pistol.
Good point. And if you're going to be carrying, whatever weapon you're going to carry, you ought to know, because if somebody's trying to kill you and you pick up a weapon, you don't have time to be sitting there studying it. Where's the safety, and do I want to cock the hammer? Somebody will take it away from you and beat you to death with it. Whatever you're going to carry for a self-defense weapon, it ought to be as familiar to you as part of your hand. You know exactly where the safety is. You know exactly how you're going to operate this thing.
You should be able to operate your gun in the dark.
Absolutely. And on revolvers, for example, you mentioned double action and single action. Well, and you also mentioned that Colt turns clockwise. And you ought to know that, because if you only had 1 or 2 rounds and you're going to load that thing, you ought to know where to put them in the cylinder, because each time you cock the hammer, that cylinder is going to rotate one direction or the other. A good rule of thumb is this: all Smith & Wesson and Smith & Wesson knockoffs turn counterclockwise. Colts and Colt knockoffs turn clockwise. And the easy way to remember that is Colt is one word, clockwise is one word.
Yeah.
Smith & Wesson, 2 words, counterclockwise. So.
One other advantage to a revolver over a pistol, and you don't have to say semi-automatic when you say pistol, it's a pistol. But snake shot, a lot of people have areas where there are quite a few snakes. Many of them are poisonous. Semi-automatic pistols do not cycle very well on the average with snake shot, whereas a revolver, you can put a snake load in there, and if you see that copperhead laying beside that bush or in the corner of your laundry room, you can simply blow the smithereens out of him.
Sure. And the reason for that, very simply, is that when you fire a revolver, the only thing that the gas built up in that cartridge does is push a bullet, a projectile, out of the barrel. With a semi-automatic, it's designed that besides that gas pressure pushing the bullet out of the barrel, the equal and opposite reaction is that some of that gas pressure is used to throw the slide to the rear, eject the old shell, and so if you don't have a projectile going out of the barrel, you lose the gas pressure and it won't cycle properly. So you're absolutely right. Snake shot does not work well in pistols.
When you talk about snake shot, for those that don't know, Ron?
It's a cartridge that most often, not always, has a plastic cap over the top, and inside that, depending on the caliber of the shot shell, anyway, it'll be like number 12 shot or it's a real fine shot, is for pest control. And a lot of people consider snakes pests, but it'll also get rid of mice and so forth without destroying your whole building. Like a little 22 with a snake shot in it, you can kill mice all day long in your barn, and it's not going to blow a hole through your side of your wall.
It's kind of like a tiny shotgun shell.
Yeah.
But my wife and I both, when we go out to our little countryside out there, since we do have a lot of snakes, we both carry our 38 revolvers on our hip when we walk. Of course, we've got other guns as well. Anyway, I've got one I consider personal protection and one I consider crowd control.
I have lots of ladies that take the class, and some
That's
of them
good.
older ladies, and surprisingly, a lot of them don't have a lot of experience with weapons. They'll go to a gun store, and because of the simplicity that we talked about, the revolver, a gun dealer will often talk them into like a Lady Smith, a 5-shot revolver. Not always the right choice, particularly the hammerless type. They're sometimes you can't cock the thing ahead of time, and some ladies have weaker hands and they have trouble squeezing the trigger when they're shooting double action. So before you buy a weapon, if you're really not that familiar and you take one of these classes, I've spent a lot of time with people and what type of weapon and what particular weapon works for them.
Hold that thought. We'll finish. We'll continue this after the news break. We're starting to run out of time right here. 7:27. Time for the news. We'll be right back. 50 degrees, cloudy skies. I'm looking at the radar. Just updated. A few showers north of Fayetteville, north and northeast of Fayetteville, east and south of Fayetteville. Just they're starting to develop the heavier showers right now at Osage Beach, Missouri, north of Lebanon, between there and Jefferson City and Columbia. A little bit of shower activity now showing up in Springfield and Branson. Anyway, back to our subject matter. Dan Hall's here. Ron Smith's here. Talking guns. Gentlemen, you want to take a few call-ins, ask a few questions while you discuss this?
Certainly.
425-4971. Dan Hall's here. Ron Smith's here. You have a question about a gun or concealed carry, give us a call. And give us a minute to put the headphones on. I've got headphones on. The guys have to have headphones here. 425-4971. Fair warning, you call the number, you will go directly on live air. So let's be careful what we say. So,
I just got through talking a little bit about the different types of revolvers. So I'm going to ask Dan to talk about the different kinds of semi-automatics because there are several.
Absolutely. And, years ago, police departments required officers to carry revolvers. And the reason for that was that most police departments were made up of ex-military. And anybody who spent any time in the military years ago could tell you horror stories about accidental discharges with an M1911 A1 caliber 45 semi-automatic pistol. And those guns, they were a hammer-type single-action semi-automatic, which means once you put a round in the chamber, it remains cocked. The only way to decock it was to hold the hammer, squeeze the trigger, and let the hammer down gently.
Real slow.
And if you slipped, you had an accidental discharge. And, of course, police departments don't like the vicarious liability of accidental discharges. So until basically Smith & Wesson with a Model 39 back in the early 70s essentially copied Walther double-action automatic. And that's an automatic that's safe because when you put a round in the chamber in that one, it's cocked. And if you're not going to fire, there's a decocking lever, which decocks it. It puts a hammer block between the hammer and the firing pin, and it disengages the trigger. That weapon is safe to carry for like a concealed carry with a round in the chamber. I would never carry an old military type 45 with a round in the chamber. Additionally, I have another one that's a problem is the Glock. A lot of police departments went to the Glock. Nice gun. If it's in a holster, you have a round in the chamber, you pull it out, you touch the trigger, it shoots. There is no decocking lever. There's no safety. That gun is fine for police and military, which it's designed for. If you're going to carry it for a concealed carry weapon, I would never carry that gun with a round in the chamber. And let's face it, concealed carry, you're not out in the street like Dodge City going to be in a shootout. You generally have time to decide that you're going to pull this weapon, and when you do, jacking around in the chamber, that noise alone could make the perpetrator decide he don't want any part of this. So I'm just really safety is a big issue. The double action automatics, 6 Hour, for example, they have a decocking lever but no safety. I prefer the H&K. I've carried that for years. The H&K, the decocking lever decocks it, and then you can flip that back up, and it has a full safety. Those are the quality weapons are H&K and 6 Hour, Smith & Wesson, Colt, Taurus makes some really nice guns, and I'm sure there's some others. And then you have some that they call Saturday Night Specials, the Lorson, the Jensen, the Phoenix, and some of those are fairly reliable. They're just very cheap, and they got the tag Saturday Night Special because they're cheap. They're inexpensive to buy. They're made a little bit differently, but essentially the two types of semi-automatics is a double action like the modern Smith & Wesson and Beretta, 6 Hour, and so on, and the old single action like the Glock and like the 45 military. And of course then there take divisions of those. Some have a hammer and some don't. I prefer a hammer. I like to be able to reach up and cock it. I want that trigger to feel exactly the same every time I touch it. And I don't shoot a double action automatic double action, mainly because the second round not going to be the same as the first one.
Yeah, those without a hammer are basically called striker fired, because with that internal hammer, and that's what it is, an internal hammer that you can't see, it goes forward and fires the gun. And I also am, I just don't want a striker fired. I want one where I can see that hammer, and I like the decocking lever.
There's different, and when you pick up a gun, there's a lot of things you ought to know. Make sure it fits your hand. For example, this is my wife's Walther PPKS. Nice little gun, easy to conceal. It's a 9mm short or 380 automatic. I have to be very careful when I pick this gun up. If you see it has a very short beaver tail, I have a big meaty hand. If I just grab that gun and shoot it, I have some meat that sticks up above that, and that slide will come back and cut me every time.
Really?
So when I pick that up, I have to kind of
roll
roll
your
that
hand under it,
make sure that I don't have any excess meat sticking up there where that slide can catch me. All of those things are kind of important to you. I had a lady show up with a brand new double action 2-inch Smith with a hammer. She had never shot. It was a 38 special. And when you get a 38 special round in a little small 2-inch revolver, there's a lot of kick to it. And she shot it a couple times, and the third shot, the hammer hooked her in the web of the hand. She had to have a stitch. It was just a gun she wasn't used to. So those are things, like I say, if you're not familiar with guns, but you want to get the license to carry, don't go buy a gun just to have a gun. Take the class and make sure the instructor goes over the types of weapons, and so you know what you're buying.
And consider the purpose for which you are buying.
Okay, that's a good point, Ron. I'm thinking if you've got concealed carry, you're in your car, gentleman may have it on his belt, lady may have it in her purse. Let's talk about in the home. Those that live alone that want some protection. We've got people tuned in right now that live by themselves.
Same thing. You have to be comfortable with that gun. And Dan already actually hit the words the same way I've got them. Anyway, you must make that gun a part of the extension of your arm. When you buy a new gun, the first thing you do before you do anything is you read that instruction manual, including some of the corny safety regulations.
The what?
And the corny safety regulations. You know, the ones like do not fold stroller with baby in the stroller. Because there's some that'll sound like that. Then you read them again. You read the whole manual until you're very familiar with it. You have never loaded this gun at all yet. You familiarize yourself with that gun. You sit there, you pick it up, you point it, you dry fire it if it is a dry fireable weapon. Not all are. Or use a
And that's where you need to know your weapon.
And then
dry fire
you
up.
must be familiar with it. Anyway, very familiar with it. And then, and only then, would I ever even think about loading that gun. Anyway, and then you practice.
Well, and keep in mind that when you would need a firearm in home invasions is generally at night when you you need to be able to know by the feel of that gun, is it ready to shoot or is it not? Where's the safety? And you can get into, when home protection, all kinds of discussions. For instance, magazine capacity. There's always this thing about reducing magazine capacity, and frankly, that has nothing to do with safety. Responsible people don't misuse a firearm, whether it's a single shot or a 100-round capacity, and a person has the intent to misuse a firearm will figure out a way to do that. But just for example, 2 years ago in Georgia, there was a woman home with her children, a home invasion, and as the people were breaking in the door, she called her husband on the cell phone and said, "What do I do?" And he said, "Well, take the pistol and go up and hide in the closet." The pistol wasn't a pistol, it was a revolver. And so she hid in the closet crawl space. Well, the home invader got there and got the door open, and she fired 6 times, hit him 5 of the 6 shots. He didn't die. He crawled outside to be arrested. But the point is, suppose there would have been 2 home invaders, and she shot 6 shots. She was out of bullets. I'd much rather she had something like this Caltech PMR 30 with 30 rounds in it. And then, because once she's out of bullets, if there's more than one, her and her children are at risk.
Well, for instance, the one I use, I called it crowd control, but it's actually my home protection gun. Anyway, I'm not going to name a brand because I think that, in the sense, they don't advertise with us. In fact, I don't think they advertise at all. But this gun holds 16 in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. And I keep it in a safe spot at home where I can easily get to it. I'm familiar with every aspect of it. And could I shoot it at night? You're darn tootin'.
Sure. You also mentioned in a vehicle. Last January, a fellow by the name of Tim Davidson from Maine had driven down to Florida along the Coast Highway. Going home, he wanted to see some different countries, so he went up through the Appalachian chain. On Highway 81, coming from Maryland into Pennsylvania, he calls 911 and tells them, "I don't know what the problem is, whether it's road rage, I'm unarmed, some crazy man in a pickup truck is chasing me and he's been shooting at me." While he's talking to 911, the pickup truck slammed him in the side, drove him off the road into a snowdrift. And while he was completely disabled and couldn't move the vehicle, the pickup truck stopped, backed up, and the gentleman walked up very casually and executed him. Now, if that's not a nightmare scenario to wake up to, you're sitting there stuck in a snowdrift and you have to watch somebody walk up and kill you. I wouldn't suggest you try that with my car.
Yeah, really.
No, I wouldn't either. Now, another thing and I think Dan's going to agree with me. Good gun, bad gun. A good gun goes bang when it's supposed to, when you instruct it to. And if it doesn't go bang when you pull that trigger, it's a bad gun.
No.
Because a good gun, anyway, is defense. An empty gun or a non-firing gun is a rock
Club,
when it comes to pistols.
Well, and that's a good point, because I also teach scuba. I have for years. When I'm 100 feet under the water, I don't want some cheap regulator that may or may not work. It has to work all the time because that's my life source. And the same thing applies to a self-defense weapon. Have a good one. That one time in your life that you may have to pick it up and use it, it needs to work.
Need to take a break. Time for Sean Hannity and other things. Be right back. 7:51, continuing our discussion about guns and concealed carry. Dan Hall, Ron Smith are here. I got a couple questions. Number one, let's say that you've lived in another state. You've got concealed carry license there. Is it transferable without going through the Arkansas class?
In many cases, yes. Each state has their own particular laws, and there are a couple of places you don't even want to go with a gun in your possession or in your car. But
why is that?
Many states have a reciprocatory, or that's probably the wrong word to use, but if you have a concealed carry here, and like you go to Missouri, they honor that concealed carry.
Okay, if you move here, we first started our law in 95. The director was authorized to enter into reciprocity agreements with other states with similar programs. We had about 6 states when I started this. And then we went to the law change to say that we would honor the license of any state that would honor ours. So we still had these reciprocity agreements, and we had about 30 states. The 2013 legislative session, they changed the law again to say Arkansas honors all other states' licenses. It's up to you to worry about the state you're traveling in. That being the case, if you moved here from, say, Texas or Arizona, you have a valid license from that state. You don't have to take the entire 6-hour course, but you do have to have a live fire demonstration and about an hour's worth of updating. I do those all the time. It's just they call it a transfer/renewal. You have an Arizona license, for example, that's good for another 6 months. You surrender that, we issue you an Arkansas license that's good for 5 years.
Don't count on getting that license quickly after you take the classes. Mine took over 3 months.
Well, the law says that the director shall issue a license within 120 days. That's 4 months. They don't want us calling down there and bugging them for at least 90 days, 3 months.
Yeah.
The delay is often the FBI doing the national fingerprint classification, and it's usually between 90 and 120 days.
Well, since we're getting a little closer, one thing I want to mention is I can't recommend highly enough that if you do own a gun, that you take a certified concealed carry class from someone like Dan or someone, that is a certified instructor. Because you're going to be surprised how much you learn. Just like the question you asked me a minute ago, that's covered in this. You can also get a little book. I keep one in my truck that has the laws from each different state. Anyway, about what you can and what you can't do, where you can carry it and where you can't. And yes, alcohol is involved in many cases. You cannot take it to it's not wise to take it to somewhere where they serve alcohol. Mm-hmm. Let me just make that real clear. And Dan can tell much more than I.
Final thoughts, Dan and Ron?
Yeah, the concealed handgun licensing course is not a gun class. I can teach somebody to pick up a gun and shoot it and kill somebody in about 5 minutes. That's the purpose of the class is to teach you how to avoid the situation and what the law is if you cannot avoid using it. Make sure that you're not charged with murder or manslaughter or sued for wrongful death. Most people find the class extremely interesting.
But they do. Mm-hmm. Ron, final thought?
It is not necessarily true that if you shoot someone trying to break into your house that you drag them through the door. Forget that. It's just not the way it is. Take the class, folks. And if you buy a gun, by golly, make yourself familiar with it. Get one that fits you, one that's comfortable, and the one that serves your purposes.
Mm-hmm. Dan, if anybody had questions, how can they get in touch with you?
The easiest way to reach me is my cell phone, 870-421-2322.
Appreciate you being here. Dan and Ron have been very informative this morning. I really appreciate it. Another quick reminder, the 6th Annual Salem High School Beta Club Bass Tournament scheduled for this weekend. Registration is open by calling 870-895-5921, or you can register day of the tournament between 6 and 7:30 a.m., which is a Saturday, of course. And first prize, I believe, is $1,000. This supports the Salem High School Beta Club, so get signed up today by calling 870-895-5921. Thanks to Dan Hall for being here and Ron Smith. We'll be back tomorrow. Right now it's the Rush Morning Update, followed by Glenn Beck. See you tomorrow.